On this episode of Outside of the Box, Christine chats with Michael Perl, president of the Grant Imahara Steam Foundation, about Steam Star and bot battles.
We show them in a short kind of TikTok-style introductory video where they introduce themselves and they talk a little bit about what their job is, how they got that job, and they touch on how they use a particular Steam concept in a really, really unexpected and unusual and creative way in their work.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Outside of the Box. And I'm really excited. Every once in a while, I get to do what I feel is a really special episode. And as you know, a lifelong Mythbusters fan and just lover of all things creative and innovative, Grant Imahara is somebody that I really looked up to. And I'm so pleased to have Michael Perl with me, who is the president of the Grant Imahara Steam Foundation, just to talk about some of the initiatives that you have going on and things like that. I'm just really thrilled to have you on the show.
Thank you, Christine. This is fun.
Yeah. So first of all, for my audience, that I'm fairly certain all of my audience knows Grant and knows like the legacy that he's created. But I think, for them maybe to get a little bit more background on you and how you came to be involved with the foundation.
Oh boy. Okay. So I started in the music industry actually, and then went from there into video games. So I'm a tech founder primarily in the video game space, and my first big studio was a studio called Aquatic, and I founded this one with my brother right after Apple opened the iOS App Store to public development. He one day was just like, hey, anyone can make a video game on this platform. Let's give it a try. And so we started developing some games, and we had some games that went on to be big viral hits. And basically over the course of about 8 years, the two of us alone built over 50 games, reached over 100 million users without any user acquisition whatsoever, just by building cool cutting edge games that used, multi-touch and the gyroscope when that came out. We got to partner with Oculus to develop one of the launch titles for the Gear VR, which was the first wireless VR headset. And then a couple of years ago, I pivoted mostly into volunteer work. And the project that led me to the Grant Imahara Foundation was during the pandemic. So I come from an audio background. I thought it would be fun to reverse engineer the language of R2-D2, because he's this famous example of sound design where prior to R2, fictional robots on TV and film spoke in human language. And R2 was the first example of a robot that's spoken in beeps and whistles in binary. So it was this amazing example of experimental sound design from Ben Burtt, who is the legend who did everything amazing audio-wise for Star Wars. And so basically reverse engineered this language, created a data set out of it, used that to seed an R2 language model that could be fed a combination of emotions and then could synthesize in real time a new R2-D2 vocalization that matches those emotions. And I published it for free as a fundraiser for FIRST. And it ended up raising a ton of money, blowing up in the droid building community, getting used by some folks at Lucasfilm. And then through those Lucasfilm people, I got connected with all of the former ILMers who make up the Grant Imahara Steam Foundation. And they brought me in at the end of last year to bring this experience designing, engaging, inclusive products for kids in the gaming space, to bring some of those sensibilities to develop some educational outreach programming with the foundation. So.
That's amazing. I think that people don't, video games have been demonized off and on throughout history as like a bad thing. And there's so much creativity in that, and there's a lot of games that really lend themselves to learning, and I think it's an amazing way to kind of get kids interesting. I'm a big fan of just like gamifying learning in general. I always have been, and I think it's a really useful tool, so I personally think it's amazing. I wanted to point out for my combat robotics friends that it's very interesting. Video games and driving a combat robot in some ways are not very different. In fact, shout out to one of the builders that I know, Perl Gray, uses a Steam Deck to control their robot. So there's lots of overlap there. I did want to talk about a couple of the really cool things that the foundation has been doing recently. First of all, I want to touch on SteamStar as a tool, because I mean, especially I've had several of the folks that have participated in SteamStar, Carrie Byron, Allie Moore, and Fawn Davis on the podcast in the past. So, I mean, you have lots of really great folks that have been a part of this. So talk about the idea behind that and kind of how that's gone so far.
Sure. So the premise of SteamStar is basically there's all this research out there that shows that influencers are really effective at reaching young people. This is something anyone who's familiar with social media at all understands this, and also understands that it's a bit of a problem in many spaces. It's dangerously effective. And this research shows that people trust influencers on the same level that they trust advice from friends and family. So, again, on social media, in marketing, we see this used for nefarious purposes all the time to just sell complete garbage. But the idea behind SteamStar is, hey, what if we use this approach and this aesthetic as a way to, instead of selling, makeup and trash, to sell STEM careers to young people, and in particular, diverse young people. Because again, this research shows it can be really, really hard to reach people from underserved communities. But influencers are actually one of the few marketing approaches where if you show a diverse influencer who looks like the people from these communities, they will engage people in those communities, and particularly young people. So it's a really effective way of onboarding young people into STEM careers. And so that's what we do with the program is we take people, the first batch was a number of people from Grants Network, like Fawn and Carrie, as you mentioned. And we show them in a short kind of TikTok style introductory video where they introduce themselves and they talk a little bit about how they, what their job is, how they got that job, and they touch on how they use a particular STEAM concept in a really, really unexpected and unusual and creative way in their work. And then that introductory video, when this is run in classrooms, is followed then by a standards aligned lesson that's developed in collaboration between the star and a professional educator to then teach that concept that they allude to in their intro video. But again, teach it through the kind of in a bespoke lesson through the theming of the kind of work that they actually do in their job.
Well, that's really great. I mean, I'm excited. I think like you said, it's a great tool, and there's that recognition. Kids see somebody that they either know or somebody that like for example, I have a daughter, and one of the big things for her in robotics is when she sees girls and women doing that, and it kind of empowers her to think, this is really something that I can get involved in. So I think it's a really great idea, and I'm excited to see how that progresses. Now, of course, being into the robots and things like that, we have to talk about bot battles. This is something that I'm particularly excited about because I love Lego and I love robots. Tell the folks what it's all about.
Boy, okay, there's a lot here. So the idea behind bot battles is obviously it was inspired by Grant's work on battle bots, Grant's outreach work, working with FIRST, coaching and mentoring FIRST teams. And the goal that we set out to achieve was to create the lowest cost, most inclusive robotics program ever in the history of robotics. And so the approach we took to this is we're using Lego. So bot bots are built out of Lego because they're accessible relative to a lot of robotics hardware. They're very cheap. And the general approach, the general design approach to this program is informed by my experience in the games industry and the fact that video games, as you alluded to earlier, Christine, are extremely engaging for kids. A little bit too engaging. It's kind of an issue. But the question that always intrigues me is, how can we take the engagement-based learnings from the games industry, where engagement is cracked, it's just solved, and how can we apply these things to education? And the answer isn't always obvious. A lot of people have tried, and a lot of people have not found long-term success at it. An example of this actually in my own family is my grandmother founded the Learning Company, which did Reader Rabbit, Math Rabbit, Treasure Math Storm, Carmen Sandiego, basically pioneered the edutainment space. And these games were a very big deal for a long time. When I was in school, they were part of the curriculum. I would go to computer lab, which was a thing that some people may remember. And we would be playing these games, not like because of my connection, but because these were part of the curriculum in our schools. And so there was this wave where everyone wanted to do this and it was this big deal and it was working. And then suddenly it stopped working. And basically this coincided with kind of the advent of really high quality, just amazing, just entertainment based video games. Basically the Learning Company got their lunch eaten by studios who didn't need to bother teaching. All they needed to do was just create the most compelling, engaging, addictive possible product that they could. And so navigating kind of modern edutainment and figuring out how, what sort of like phase 2 or 3 or whatever it may be of this initial wave of educational games, what that looks like and how we can come up with a sustainable model that will engage kids and hold their attention in a very distraction-filled environment is kind of the key. And so this approach we're taking with bot battles is we're not taking kind of the common video game, a really common approach to gamifying education is to just like use, take leaderboards and take achievements and apply sort of these kind of common gaming tropes onto existing curriculum and existing programs. And it hasn't worked very well. And the reason I would argue that that's the case is it's taking kind of the like pieces of the veneer of what works about video games without understanding fundamentally what are the actual design components that make games so engaging and so addictive. And to get that information for bot battles, we're using this model from a firm called Quantic Foundry. These guys are basically the keepers of video game engagement data. They have for many years been collecting data on what are the things that motivate gamers, that make gamers want to play particular games. And they have all this data and all these really interesting models that look at, okay, what are, women 15 to 23, what are the motivating factors that make them want to play games? And it's this model that's used by a ton of really big game studios really effectively because they can look at, okay, this is the audience that we want to cater to, which are the particular motivators that we want to incorporate into our game. And as far as I know, no one has ever taken that model outside of the gaming space and tried to apply it to something like education. And so that's what Bot Battles does. So we start with this premise of, okay, it's a Lego robotics program. Traditional robotics programs miss hard on a ton of demographics. They miss hard on young girls. So what are the motivators that exist that can help improve engagement for young girls? And so you turn in this data set and you come away with answers like fantasy and storytelling. And so when you look at bot battles, yes, there's all the kind of Lego robotics components, but there's also this whole element of fantasy and storytelling where we present all of the materials in narrative form. And we wrap all of what you're doing when you're fighting these bots in an allegory where you're not just yourself fighting Lego robots, you are the little pilot avatar riding your bots. And these bots are fighting each other to break each other down into recyclable scraps. So there's like a sustainability allegory tied to it. So that's basically the objective, is look at kind of where are the gaps in traditional robotics programs, look at the data on how you can, what are the motivators that will let you engage the young players who tend to fall through those gaps, and how do we create this widely appealing, very inclusive robotics experience that can resonate with everybody.
I think that makes sense. I mean, I think that that's a really smart idea. Not that it's exactly the same thing, but I would say, like, given the rise of interest in Dungeons and Dragons and role-playing games, that storytelling is a really big thing for a lot of people, including kids right now. So incorporating that into a learning model, I mean, I think it's a really smart move. I'm a little biased. I'm really excited about all of this stuff. So, but yeah, it's amazing how far all of that has come from, not to date myself, but like playing the Oregon Trail in school. I don't know what I learned from the Oregon Trail other than dysentery is bad, but it's definitely, that all has evolved far, far from the place that it once was, and I think that it's an exciting thing to see.
I was going to ask you kind of what were, when you were first getting into robotics, what were some of the kind of elements? Were there unexpected elements that appealed to you that didn't appeal to maybe to your peers?
Probably that, for me, I've always had, a very creative mind, and I'm drawn to things that are different and unique. And I've said this a lot on my podcast, but one of the big things that drew me in the very, very beginning was, as I'm sure you remember, Lisa Winter had a lovely bot called Tentamushi that was a giant ladybug. And it's unexpected. It's not something that you think you're going to see in combat robotics. It's just this giant ladybug trying to eat this like other, death looking robot. And it immediately got me interested. I'm like, this is cool. She is this, teenage girl that has this ladybug robot. And I thought it was the most amazing thing. So, I mean, that was it for me, is just, this is unique. This is different. And I think what combat robotics has shown historically is that ability to adapt and be able to not only have robots that are very good at doing what they're supposed to do, but also robots that are very creative. And I think it's that juxtaposition that keeps me hooked on it, ever since, for, like 20 years or something at this point.
I love that. And to tie that back into the motivators, so the ones you just touched on are design and fantasy. I would think that, this is something we try to lean into this with bot battles, where, we want the rules of combat in bot battles are specifically designed to encourage people to create hilarious, bizarre, whimsical designs. We don't want people min-maxing these bots because, if they're a min-max bot, it's not going to break ever. There's no spectacle to it. So we really, we try to legislate in creativity. We try to legislate in design and fantasy to encourage people to make bots that are intentionally flimsy and that will fall apart in really spectacular ways in battle, which is very important when you're dealing with Lego motors and not like BattleBots grade commercial motors.
Yes, it is definitely a little bit different what you want to think about depending on what type of robot you're working with. So that's for sure. Now, for people that are interested in doing it and getting involved in the bot battles, how do they do that?
Botbattles.org is the answer. The program is free. So we don't, it's not monetized. We don't sell the materials. So you go to botbattles.org and you will be taken to the player's guide, which lays out the rules, lays out which Lego robotics components are allowed and which aren't. So it will kind of walk you through. It's possible, if people already have the right motors and hubs, they might not need to buy anything. And again, on the kind of accessibility front, a really important piece of this design is we didn't want there to be, we're not selling a kit, we're not restricting which specific Lego you're allowed to use or not allowed to use. We don't want people to have to go and buy more Lego. We want people to use the Lego that they already have and use them in creative and unexpected ways. So depending on what your Lego collection looks like, it's entirely possible that you may be able to start bot battling within seconds. But at a minimum, you might need to pick up a hub or a motor or two.
for parents that are watching, especially those that have young kids, that they're like, I'm not really ready to have them build like an ant weight or a beta weight, or something that has like scary blades on it. Bot Battle seems like a great resource to get involved with and kind of move forward. If for my audience, what other resources, as far as like the website, anything else like that, should they check out if they want to see like SteamStar, anything else like that?
Yeah, so grantimaharafoundation.org is also a hub where you'll find more information on the kind of broader approach to bot battles. SteamStar also is free. All of those lessons and videos are available, again, grantimaharafoundation.org. So it's all out there. And the main thing, our objective is just getting it in front of kids, getting these programs into the hands of educators, getting them in the hands of parents, and putting them to use. And so, if they're come to us if you have questions. Come to us if you have, education networks that you'd like to work to get this into. We are just here to serve and to give. That was Grant's mindset and Grant's motivation, and we are just here to, continue that momentum and continue that spirit.
Yeah, that's awesome. I couldn't agree more. Well, for those that are watching, definitely check out those resources. I think it's amazing. I think that we need to have that like STEM education and those creative minds and that innovative mindset now more than ever. So please make sure that you check that out. If you're watching the show, please make sure that you like, subscribe, share, comment, all of that, because we want to keep growing this, growing robotics, growing STEM. I think it's awesome. And thank you to Michael for joining. And we'll see everybody next time on the show.
Thank you, Christine.